Welcome back to Wrapped. I'm your host, Colton Hinderliter, and I am actually by myself today. I'm not joined by my co-host, Ryan Key. As today, the topic at hand is something that is very special to me. And the music I'll be talking about on today's episode will kind of give you more of an insight into, my taste and who I am as a person and what defines, I guess, maybe my musical appreciation. Because today we're going to talk about one of my favorite artists of all time. Actually, let me rephrase that. My literal favorite artist of all time. Robert Bryson Hall III, aka better known as Logic. So we're going to delve into him, and I'm going to be ranking his entire, I guess you could say, discography. We're going to go all the way back to his early mixtapes, so maybe those aren't necessarily considered like discography for some people, but every project he's ever made, all 14 of them, we're going to go back in time to 2009 until now. Because as of recently, if you've been paying attention, Logic has decided to retire, at least from the rap game, as far as we are aware, and has dropped his, I guess, last album, No Pressure, on July 24th, 2020. He, if you've been paying attention at all to it, he signed a seven-figure, at least six, maybe seven-figure deal with Twitch to exclusively stream with them as the first musical artist to do a deal signing with them. And he has a record company called Bobby Boy Records with like 6 artists under it. He has multiple screenplays, 2 more books. He's making a movie with J.J. Abrams. The man's busy. He's also got a family, and he moved to Montana. So he's still got a lot going on, but I've been watching his Twitch streams, and as far as I'm concerned, or I know, he really is retired. If he decides to come back to music, it'll be when his kid is a little bit older, a couple years on the road. He might release a beat tape. He scrapped that idea initially. He was supposed to do one called Louis Vuitton Briefcase. Never happened. Fans have asked about it. He's like, I don't think it's going to come out. But he has talked about giving those beats out to like producers and like up and coming rappers and artists and things like that. All this to say, in light of this large decision from a still pretty young person, and as I said just a moment ago, my favorite musical artist of all time, I decided to go back, and in the week that led up to the release of No Pressure, I went back in time and I started from the beginning in chronological order, and I listened to every single project he's ever released. Now, I've listened to these all before multiple times, some in order, some in a back-to-back situation, but I've never, it took me a week. Like, I would take like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday and Friday of the week of the 24th of July. All I listened to was him, back to back to back to back to back to back. There really was no other music going through my headphones. And that was the first time I've done that. And I've ranked his projects once before on my phone based off of just how I felt about them. And so I was like, you know what? To really gauge how I feel about each project, let's go and listen to every single one in order. And some rankings I thought were no surprising, like my number one stayed the same, but then other things changed. I ranked some higher and I ranked some lower. And the biggest question for me was, what is my favorite Young Sinatra or my favorite mixtape of his? Because I've kind of gotten back and forth on those a lot. But anywho, let us get into it. With number 14, we're going to throw it all the way back in time to 2009, very like top of this man's career, basically, with the release of Logic's first project, which was called Psychological, the mixtape. At the time, let me give you some context here. At the time, Logic went by the name Psychological. And then later, after this mixtape, he chose to shorten the name to just Logic. So the rapper we all know today had a much longer name, and that's where it's kind of derivative from, is like he's like a psychological rapper, like he's almost like a therapy session kind of thing. He's kind of delving into his own mind and into the mind of the listener, of the fan, what have you. That being said, I'm glad he shortened the name. I think this is way too long of a name for him to be out here toting around. This is the lowest project on my list. It's pretty obvious. It's just like, it's very, very early in his career. This is before he really gets his Knights of the Round Table of team members and producers. He literally like pulls all the beats from different like online free beat places. They all sound kind of the same, very like generic, like 2009, like lots of like gunshot-esque like drop pop beats basically. It's just like, it's not very refined. As you see here, there's not even really cover art for it, and it's really hard to find this, because we're going to look at some mixtapes here today, and the mixtapes are all on DatPiff minus the mixtapes, quote unquote, that he released on streaming. This one's not even on DatPiff. He doesn't even really claim it that much. I also just wonder if it's because like he just like, if he doesn't like it as much, or if he doesn't have the rights. I'm not really sure why it's not on there. But yeah, it's not even on DatPiff. So there's not even cover art for it. It's literally was just burned onto CDs. And just handed out on the block and like sold to like people basically. So yeah, like you can tell like this is very like bare bones. This is like a 17-year-old kid who's just burning out freaking like Memrex CDs on a CD burner off of his like laptop in his like mom's basement kind of vibes. That being said, the bars on this are pretty strong. And there are some like cool songs on here. It's just like, it's just not refined at all. So, your favorite artist's first attempt isn't always the best. That being said, it's not bad. It's just like in comparison, because he was able to get a lot more resources at his disposal, there's quite a leap, I feel like, from this to the 14th. So the first one, the 14th out of all of his 14 projects, is Psychological, the mixtape. So let's actually then jump to number 13, which I'm going to navigate to DatPiff here, because as I said a moment ago, all of his mixtapes are on DatPiff. You type in, Logic on DatPiff, and for those who aren't familiar with that, it's a free streaming service, kind of. It's completely web-based. There's an app on your phone, but it's not like Spotify where I have like an app on my laptop. It is a place where everything is free. If you are an artist and you put something on here, then you don't get any money off of it. And Logic uses a lot in his early part of his career as his manager, Chris Zhao of Visionary Music Group, the first signee. Chris suggested, hey, you should drop stuff for free, like give lots of content to your fans. And he did that for a while. As you can see, there is actually these 4 that are titled exclusive. Those are his 4 mixtapes. I had to type in Logic. There's, all kinds of other stuff that of people saying I am Logic or whatever, but these are the 4 that I'm looking at here. All right, so right after he dropped Psychological, 2010, Logic dropped another mixtape called Young, Broken, Infamous. This is my 13th. Young, Broken, Infamous started really a lot then of his sound, because with Psychological and the mixtape, it's like he was trying to sound like everybody else, versus Young, Broken, Infamous, in my opinion, sounds like he's crafting his own sound here. And there's a lot of really good songs on here. Going back and listening to this again, I was like, all right, this snaps. Versus Psychological is short. It's kind of hard to get through though. This is not hard to get through at all. So for being like the 13th project, like the second lowest, very impressive. Probably another testament to why he is my favorite musical artist. And we'll get into that a little bit later. I haven't explained my context of that. I kind of just said this bold statement, which I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, Logic is corny, or he fell off, or whatever. We'll get to that. Don't worry. Anywho, so Unbroken Infamous is 19 tracks. It's significantly longer than Psychological. And from here on through all of the rest of his mixtapes, they're all long until his debut studio album. Because back in the day, 10 years ago, it was normal as a rapper. And I guess it's still normal now. Like Lil Baby put out like a 22 track album, but almost every rapper was putting out mixtapes that were like hour and a half long, 20 tracks minimum, basically. It was very, very normal, especially too because streaming, while you could stream this on DatPiff, but like Spotify wasn't really blown up by this point. You wanted as much content for your fans to hang on to as possible because they would have to go either download this or they would need to go to a store and like buy a physical copy, basically. So there wasn't as much competition from other artists. But yeah, this is pretty solid. There's a lot of skits on here. He uses skits a lot in his music, as we'll see later. But there's some skits from Love Jones. It's a pretty famous like 90s love film. He has a song called Love Jones. I think this is one of the standout tracks from this. But then there's also a song, that's a third track called Young Sinatra. So this is the birth of the persona, one of his many characters. Logic is one character, right? Most of his discography is him as Logic, but there's times that he's not really Logic, kind of like a Beyonce, Sasha Fierce alter ego thing, or Eminem, Slim Shady. He has multiple alter egos, his most famous being Young Sinatra. And this is the first reference to this character. And it's completely like he is a rapper who is inspired by Frank Sinatra. Right? Logic, as an artist himself, has quoted Frank Sinatra as being the greatest musical influence in his life, like I think ever, and definitely outside of hip hop. And this would spawn him to then create a series of mixtapes called Young Sinatra afterwards. So like this is a really important part in his career, but I'm not here ranking things. So this isn't bad. This is actually really good. It's just that he's still very early. Once again, it's only his second mixtape. And so he still is trying to find his footing and his resources, and he's trying things here. But going back and listening, I'm like, there's a lot of songs on here that really just bop. Really just bop. So still a solid project. We're still going to live in mixtape land here. We're going on to number 12 out of 14 is going to be Young Sinatra, Undeniable. So Young Sinatra, Undeniable is the second in the Young Sinatra series, but is the fourth mixtape of his ever, like, or fourth project as a whole ever released. So this is, I think, 2012 here. Yeah, 2012. He's already done by this point the first Young Sinatra, which is obviously higher up on my list. Yeah, Young Sinatra, Undeniable is my least favorite Young Sinatra. I've always felt that way. I don't know why. It just is like the first Young Sinatra I think is really solid. The third one is also really solid, but to me the second one just dips, and I think it might be because of the length, which I know I talk about a lot in rap. I'm like, ugh, too long this, too long that. My problem with Drake is he's too long with his albums. This is 22 tracks. I want to note that all Young Sinatra mixtapes are like 22 tracks, so they're all long, but this one doesn't kind of earn the length as much, which is unfortunate because I feel like the first like 2/3 are really solid, and then the last third I get lost in the last third of it, and I kind of fall off of it. I will say though that it starts off with him sampling Inception, like the score from the Christopher Nolan movie. He's noted before Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino are his like two favorite directors of all time. And I love Inception. I love the score. It's like the Time song by Hans Zimmer. If you've ever listened to that score. And it's a great start. And then it goes for a while. And then, like I said, it kind of falls off a little bit for me because I think all the songs sound a little bit of the same afterwards. And there's just not as many standout tracks or memorable tracks on this Young Sinatra versus the other two that we'll see later. I do want to note, though, that by this point, he has aligned kind of his core circle of friends and influences. He's living in the basement of his friend Big Lembo's mom's house, like living there for free, basically. I think he's still working at McDonald's, and just like coming home at night and just cranking out tracks with his in-house producer, Six. So we're starting to see a lot more consistency with this project. And there's also a song on here I want to note called Dear God, which is a track that he kind of might reference a good bit later in his discography. And it's just a great track. It's literally just like a letter, like saying like, Dear God, I'm like kind of praying to you to like all the things that he wants in life, like being successful or just trying not to be in poverty, essentially. But yeah, this is his second mixtape and my number 12. And so now we're still in mixtape land. Surprise, surprise. His mixtapes are the lowest for me, I think, because of their length overall. Like I said, 22 tracks is just not my vibe. That being said, though, for 22 track early projects with like no freaking money and no label, these are all impressive because, I've listened to J. Cole, Drake, Kendrick mixtapes, and there's some standouts of them. J. Cole has some really good mixtapes, and so did Drake. But these are, I want to say some of these are better. Some of the higher ones for me are better than some of the mixtapes from maybe your favorite artist. Once again, this is my opinion. Logic is my favorite artist, so maybe I'm just biased. Anyways, number 11 is the first Young Sinatra. So we have this cover art of literally Frank Sinatra. It's released in 2011. So it's the third project as a whole, first of his Young Sinatra series. And there's just a lot of songs on here that still just do it for me. Like they still bop. There's a lot of these songs are extremely memorable. I think it only gets a little tired in the latter part, like for a couple songs of the project. Because by this point, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like an hour in. I'm getting a little tired. Other than that, though, this is a super solid project. And what is cool, like going back and like listening to these are very different than anything he's making nowadays. It's like the epitome of lo-fi hip hop, which is one of the reasons I got into him because I love lo-fi, like Nujabes, Jay Dilla, all that kind of like chill cow vibes, just with some bars over it. And so I was really into that in college. And when I found him and I found this stuff, I was like, this is exactly what I'm looking for right now. Something lyrical, but something that I could also just like, I don't know, study to or what have you. But yeah, so this project is really solid. Every song, I'd say the first 10 songs are like back to back to back, pretty freaking strong. He talks a lot about airplanes and traveling, which is cool, which makes this a great project for traveling, which is something I always look for. I know it's a weird tangent, but I feel like there's not a lot of music out there that you can bump on a plane. It's like chill enough, but it's also hype enough to keep you awake. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I really think that this project is pretty impressive, and like going back and listening to it, I appreciate it. I feel like much more because it's aged really well. I mean, it's been 9 years and it still holds up. It really does. He samples a lot of people on these. I want to note, I should have noted this a little bit earlier, with all his Young Sinatras, even though Six is producing these and he's putting some beats here and there, it's all very sample heavy. There's no features until the third Young Sinatra because man didn't have money. Like the only people he's going to feature is his friend Big Lembo or maybe another local small Maryland artist. But man ain't got money. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to sample Michael Jackson because one, I'm never going to get to work with him because I'm not that big. And he would be passed away by the time that I would get to work with him probably, which is true. I'm going to say Michael Jackson. I'm going to sample, I think he has Gladys Knight, Aretha Franklin, bands like Coldplay. It's just people that he really liked that he wanted to put almost a spin on. It's like this floating thing between cover and not. And a lot of early hip hop artists do that, where they're like, I'm going to grab somebody's song who I like and lay a verse on it. And honestly, that's how I discovered a lot of other artists' music, where I would be like in a store and like, oh, this is that Logic song. And you're like, I don't hear Logic on it. And then later you find out, oh, wait, that's a sample. Like, he literally just uncleared sample that, which is why none of these are on streaming. Probably won't come to streaming because straight up sampling, like whole song samples. So if you want to hit these up, you got to go to DatPiff. It's totally free. Also, YouTube has them. I found the psychological mixtape on YouTube, and some people put them all together. So it's another way to catch those as well, YouTube or DatPiff. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing here because we're actually going to pivot a little bit. We're going to go away from DatPiff, and we're going to go into some Spotify label releases. Number 11 is Bobby Tarantino. So actually, I'm sorry, number 10, I can't even count anymore, guys. Number 10 is Bobby Tarantino. This is another mixtape, but as you'll notice, it's on Spotify. That is because after Logic signed his record label deal with Def Jam like 2013-ish and dropped his debut Under Pressure in 2014, from then on out, everything he's released, whether it's a soundtrack, a mixtape, a studio album, whatever, it's put onto streaming services and it's distributed by Def Jam. But this is a mixtape. There is no physical version of this project at all. You can't buy a CD of it unless you burn it yourself. You can't buy an LP of it. It's only online purchases of digital downloading and streaming. And this was a mixtape that was released after his second studio album, The Incredible True Story, and his third studio album, Everybody, which is 2015, 2017, 2016. So many hold you over, kind of like a Amine's 1.5 essentially. And it was literally dropped in the summer, and he was doing festival sets, and he also did a joint tour with G-Eazy, and then I think YG and Yo Gotti opened for that. It was like the Runaway tour or something like that. And so it's just some summer jams. It's pretty short, 11 songs. And what's cool is that it introduces another alter ego, which is Bobby Tarantino. So you have Young Sinatra, who's like jazzy. You have Logic, who's like conscious rap. And then you have Bobby Tarantino, who's just fun. It's just trap and boom bap, basically. Southern, modern beats, essentially. And this is a character based on Quentin Tarantino, as I mentioned a moment ago. That's Logic's favorite director. He mentions him in almost every project of his at some point. And it would start, as you see in this upper top corner, the flex hat vibe. Yeah, I've got one of those. It's in my hand right now because I'm just a fanboy. But there's some cool stuff on here, and most notably, there's a Pusha T feature, which is really dope because that man doesn't really do that many features, and he's a very strong lyricist, and so is Logic, and this was a really cool moment. And there's also a song called Flexecution, which everyone thought would be the name of the next album, or at least this project. I was like, oh, Flexecution's about to happen, but it's just a song. It's pretty cool. Super Mario World was another standout single from this as well. He also teased everybody with the African Aryan track on the track called Studio Ambiance at Night, Malibu. It's literally like someone's phone sitting in the studio while he's recording African Aryan from everybody. Just kind of teasing your fans, basically. There's also another track called A Word From Our Sponsor, which is a kind of return of a character from the Young Sinatra mixtapes that I haven't mentioned yet, who is named Marty Randolph, who Logic portrays through a very pitched up voice. He works at a company called Sellout Records, and he basically is Logic's commentary on how the music industry tends to turn rappers into commodities, It calls Logic all the time on his mixtapes going, please sign to me so we can make you irrelevant in 5 years and rob you of all your money. And then you be known by nobody anymore. And Logic is like, nah, I don't do that. So it's been 2 projects by this point, about 3 years since the fans have last heard Marty Randolph try to call Logic. And so he comes back on this and it's like, oh, it's Marty Randolph again. It's really cool. My favorite track on this though is Deeper Than Money, which is kind of one of maybe my favorite Logic tracks ever. I love the beat, super lo-fi, kind of different from the rest of the album. It ends also this project on a very like, whoa kind of note for a project that's supposed to be fun. But yeah, I really enjoy this project. It is my number 10 though. It's just fun. It's not as fleshed out, I think, as some of his other projects. Now then, for number 9, we have Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. So this is a interesting one because people hate this project, absolutely trash on it. And I've always enjoyed it. Like, I think it's, a lot of people don't like it because had he called this Bobby Tarantino 3, I think people wouldn't hate it as much. Because it is very, he described it as Bobby Tarantino meets Under Pressure, which I think is fair because there's a lot of tracks on here that are fun. There's a lot of tracks on here too that are kind of like, ooh, he's going into something deeper a little bit. But I think because there's such a gray area, people are like, I can't tell if this is supposed to be conscious commentary or if it's supposed to just be fun. And I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to hate on it. I think the rollout was super strong too. Every single he put out for this album was really good. And then the album itself isn't as deep as the singles go in content. I think was a lot of people's issues. I don't know. People hated this thing. I defend the hell out of him. I had to defend the hell out of him after he dropped this because people hated so much. And I was like, I like this. And going back and listening to it again, it's got bops. It's, it's not super high. It's my number 9, but it's not bad. And, I also firmly believe the man doesn't make bad music. Like, he doesn't release a bad album. He just releases an album that is maybe not as lofty or as maybe perceived good as another project of his. Because I think it's 2 people like held him to a really high standard. And he was just like, I don't even think he realized it. And he was like, I just want to have fun and then make some cool songs and drop them. Like, as a fan, I feel blessed that this man literally, this is the last piece of his 4-album 2-year run, I call it. Because you'll notice, if you're watching on YouTube at least, it was released in 2019. And what happened was everybody dropped in 2017. He's nominated for a Grammy. Then over the course of the next 2 years, he dropped 4 projects. And this was the 4th one of those projects. And so it's kind of like, bro, the man's dropping every 6 months. Like, and they're full lengths. It's an hour-long, 55-minute, 16-track project. So I was like, maybe this is me kowtowing, but I was like, how can we be like all like deep and like saying like, oh, this isn't that good, when it's like, yeah, if you took 3 years to make a project, maybe it would be this very tight thing. But by that point, you don't even have that much content from him. He'll take what you can get. So I don't know. There's a lot of reasons why I feel like people hate on this thing. There's a lot of reasons why I think it's good. I want to know that this is very feature heavy. I mean, Homicide with Eminem bodied on this. And I don't love Eminem that much, but man bodied on this. And they sounded great together. He also had YBN Cordae on here, who I'm a big fan of. He has a collaboration G-Eazy, who he's good friends with. It's the first time he's ever worked with Gucci Mane. This is like the 3rd time he's worked with Wiz Khalifa. And then he also had Will Smith and his own father, Logic's father, Robert Bryson Hall I. So like just the features on this are really crazy. And then Lost in Translation being the last track is such a standout for me. Once again, in his Nujabes lo-fi vibes, Keanu Reeves has an entire song dedicated to him. And also too, like, I think people hated this because it was him on purposely trying to almost sound like your typical mumble trap rapper. And it was that, but like to an elevated scale, and it sounded good. And people hated that. Maybe if somebody who actually is a mumble trap rapper made it, they wouldn't hate it. I don't know. It's a mishmash. I think cover art for this album is also fire. But that being said, because it's kind of a little bit all over the place, it's just not super high, which is wild because I felt like as Logic has progressed in his career, his discography has always gone up in a slope, and this is a little bit of a dip for him. I think it was just because he was working so hard. It's just a little bit of a dip, but I still enjoyed it. People were like, "That is a big dip, sir." It was crazy. Anywho, moving on from that, we're gonna go to number 8, which is Young Sinatra, Welcome to Forever. So this is the last Young Sinatra of the triple, well, I should say last. It's the third out of 4 Young Sinatras, but it's the last one before he took a hiatus from that character because it was dropped in 2013. He didn't return to that character until 2018. Maybe it was 17. Either way, it was a while. This is like the out of that trio of 1, 2, and 3. This is the best out of those 3 in my opinion. At this point, he, as it notes, had just been on the 2013 cover of the XXL freshman class. He was really making it out here. He'd already signed to Def Jam by this point, but he was like, I have this project I want to finish. I'm going to put this out on DatPiff, and then I'll get to my studio debut. So he was kind of working on those simultaneously. I also want to note this is like the first time he's really getting features. He has John Bellion on here, which is the second person to sign to Visionary Music Group. John Bellion bodies the vocals on that, by the way. He also featured Jhené Aiko, Kid Ink, Trinidad James, Dizzy Wright, who he met at XXL. I'm not really familiar with Elijah Blake. And then he even has a number of other notable producers. Like No ID is on here. This is the first time that they've worked together, as well as his now pretty strong circle of friends. This is a great project in my opinion. It really took in my opinion, dip of the second mixtape, just a little bit of dip, not as good as the first, brought it back and doubled up on it, took the first Young Sinatra and like just elevated both of them together. Yeah, it's very cool. He also featured John Pops Witherspoon, who, if you've ever watched the Friday movies, he was the grandfather in those, and he plays Logic's quote unquote dad in this. He's not his real father in real life. It's supposed to be him like recording music as a kid. It's really cool. I enjoyed this project a lot. I think it's super strong. Welcome to Forever intro is probably maybe one of Logic's best intro songs ever. Once again, John Bellion bodies. Man is in play. Okay, so then we're going to now go on to my number 8, which is going to be another Bobby Tarantino with Bobby Tarantino 2. Actually, number 8, I'm crazy. Number 7, well, I can't even count anymore. Number 7, Bobby Tarantino 2. This is better than the first Bobby Tarantino in my opinion. Maybe it's because it's longer, it's 43 minutes. It just took that template and doubled down on it, basically. And it'd be slapping. He also like really pushed buttons with just the experimental parts of it. Like one of the first singles was the song Every Day featuring Marshmello, in the sense that Marshmello produced the beat. It sounds like an EDM beat. And the man came out and bodied an EDM beat, kind of showing like how diverse he is. Another single on here, which is the last track, is 44 More, which is a callback to the song 44 Bars on Bobby Tarantino 1. So kind of creating this idea of being cyclical. Literally, it's just him rapping straight bars, no hook. And it's all fire. He also features 2 Chainz. This is their first collaboration together. Big Sean, this is like their third collaboration. Wiz Khalifa again. And then himself with Young Sinatra, where you, like I said, you have Logic, you have Bobby Tarantino, and you have Young Sinatra. No, said Marty Randolph, whatever. And so on his Bobby Tarantino album, he throws down a boom bap beat and says, I'm going to feature myself via Young Sinatra. Freaking wild, right? Like how J. Cole features Kill Edward, which is himself as well. And that's a cool moment. There's also the intro, which is called Grandpa Spaceship, which is Rick and Morty. If you've ever watched the show Rick and Morty, Logic was in an episode of season 2, and he's good friends with Justin Roiland, who's the creator and voice actor of Rick and Morty. And I guess he basically just asked him, hey man, the other time we worked on your show together, well, how about you come work on my album real quick? And he comes in and he does an original snippet as Rick and Morty of them talking about Logic and playing his music, which is super cool. He also has a sample of Elton John, where Elton John called him after the Grammys and was calling him to ask him to do the revitalized remix of Benny and the Jets. And so he's like, hey, Logic, it's Elton John. It's just kind of like, this is him flexing. Like he had for the music video for Contra, he's driving around in his i8 BMW car. Like it's just flexing. And you know what? It's a heck ton of fun. And yeah, it just slaps. Yeah, it slaps. It's not my favorite just because like my favorite moments of him are Logic and his conscious rap. That's just my bag for him. But for not being conscious rap, it still really slaps. Okay, now we're moving on to number 6, which is something very different from the rest of his discography because it's not even an album, it's not even a mixtape, it's a soundtrack. And it's called Supermarket. And this was the soundtrack to accompany Logic's New York Times #1 best-selling novel, Supermarket. It's about a boy working in a supermarket, and it's kind of like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And so the soundtrack, I remember I saw him live one time, and he played piano, and then he started rapping, and I was like, wait, what is this? And he said, this is something from Supermarket. And I was like, okay. And the whole point of this is to kind of accompany the book, even though it doesn't reference any of the characters. It kind of references just the themes, essentially. And then the whole entire sound of it is, I guess, like some 41 late 90s, early 2000s punk rock kind of vibes, like Green Day, like 2002, circa 2002. And I remember we weren't sure because we'd heard, and when I say we, I mean fans of Logic. We weren't really sure, like, we knew this was going to happen, and the book had a release date. I pre-ordered the book, came out March 2019, and I remember the book came out, and then I just saw it on Instagram. He was like, it's out. He didn't promo any of this. No single, nothing. And I think because of that, it's madly underrated, and people, like, some people, the critics hated it mainly. They're like, this is a 2 out of 10, just because I think it's just so different. Like, yes, Logic is not a trained singer. The man's a rapper, but he sings in his rap songs sometimes. And I remember I put on the first track of this, and I was like, holy cow, what is this? This is such a not even 180, like a 7. What is it? 360 times 2 is like, what, 7 something, 720 or something? It was such a spin around, but it was good. This was my number 3 album overall of 2019, just because it's so impressive to me that someone who sits in one bag for so long can go and do a completely different genre and still do it well. A lot of people felt that this was not done well, that he couldn't sing, and I was like, the man can actually sing. Is he Demi Lovato or Sam Smith? No. But there's been a lot of rappers who tried to sing and it hasn't worked out well at all. This worked out pretty well in my opinion. I don't know. I really like this album. I think it's really good. It's really cool to hear, like, for people of our generation, a lot of people of us did not grow up, especially younger kids, even younger than me. They're not growing up listening to this kind of genre of sound unless they choose to go back and listen to it, which I don't know if that's super common. And so it's kind of cool it could act as an introduction where you say, this very modern artist is doing a sound that is very not modern. And it could introduce you to all kinds of other songs that Logic was inspired by in making this. It's really cool. It has no features. Actually, that's a lot. It has one feature from a kid named Judo. That's it. Otherwise, there's no features except samples. There's a really cool track called I'm Probably Gonna Rock Your World, and it's produced by Mac DeMarco. It was a 1-minute freestyle on Logic's Instagram before he dropped this, and I was like, holy cow, what is this? This is so cool. He raps like twice on here, and when he does, it's really cool because he like does a drop and he'll rap, and then he'll go back to singing and playing guitar. Super cool. This was actually higher. This was one of the shockers, is that this was like my number 2 for a while of his whole discography, because it really impressed me. It is now, as I said, my number 6. It's not that it's not good. It's just that the next 5, the top 5 I'm about to get into, are all heavy hitters. So they're kind of hard to beat. And kind of going back, I was like, Supermarket is fire still, but I don't know if it's better than these other 5 I'm about to drop here. So let's get into that. This is the top 5. And we are going to kick off my top 5 with the last of the Young Sinatras, which is YSI4 or YSIB, Young Sinatra 4. That's what it stands for. This came out as a shock because, as I said, in 2013, he did his last Young Sinatra. He started doing studio stuff. We didn't think we were going to hear from him again with that character. No, 2018 surprised us all. On my birthday, he dropped this album, and I liked it a lot at first, but going back and listening to it again recently, it's really, really good. It is my favorite Young Sinatra. Like, he kind of took time to refine his sound on a studio level, revisited the character, and he bodied. It's really cool. It's a full circle moment. It's very much an album that it's for the fans, right? He features, like, the first track is a 7-minute long call back to his second Young Sinatra, where you could call a number before he dropped the album. I did it twice. I'm not on this album. It's okay. I'm not bitter. And you could call and you could say, hey, Logic, this is why I like your music. And it's just like 5 minutes of fans calling him and saying, like, I love you for this reason, which is really cool. There's also some crazy features on here. Most notably, the entirety of the Wu-Tang Clan minus Old Dirty Bastard, because he is deceased. But the rest of them, he like literally called RZA apparently and just said, hey man, I'm kind of drunk, but how could I get all of you guys on a song? He said, oh, it's no big deal. You just gotta ask me. So he just asked him, can you do it? He's like, yep. So Wu-Tang Forever is a like literally 8-minute long track with 2 Logic verses and then 1 verse from every single member of the Wu-Tang Clan. Legendary hip-hop-ish here, guys. Crazy. 100 Miles and Running with Wale and John Lindahl, who is a signee to his imprint, Bobby Boy Records. Got Haley Steinfeld on here. Kajo, which is a person in his record label as well. He's a pianist, kind of instrumental artist. Slajo, Miglembo, all 3 of these people are people just like in his camp. Jaden Smith as well as a feature. So he had Will Smith on Confessions and Jaden Smith on this. All the Smiths, man. But this is a really impressive, tight project, and I really love top 5 Logic songs of all time. The Adventures of Stony Bob. The beat is fire. The sound of it is fire. The bars are really cool. It's all chill, like island vibes. It's just so different for him. And it's one of the few times he does that sound. He does it really well here. And yeah, I went back and listening. I was like, man, this project does a lot of really cool stuff. It's long though. It's an hour and 15 minutes, mostly because he has an 8-minute Wu-Tang track, a 7-minute long fan track, and then he has a Kanye J. Cole style Last Call, which is almost 11 minutes long of him just talking and being like, thanks for being a fan. It's really, really good. This aged well because it got better with age, in my opinion. Okay, so if you have ever listened to Logic, you might have noticed that, hey, Colton, I haven't seen any of the studio conscious rap Logic albums you've been talking about this entire time that you might be super familiar with. Yeah, well, there's your answer. There's four of them, and they're my top four. The real question is, what order are they in? And this is something I struggled with a lot because they're all so good. I'm like, I don't know which is better than the other half the time. Kind of maybe it depends on my mood, but this is how I'm feeling right now. This is what I'm probably going to try to stick to. So I'm going to jump off with number four being Under Pressure, which is Logic's studio debut. I have referenced before. It was released in 2014. It's 15 tracks, an hour and 7 minutes long, at least in the deluxe version. There's a standard version, which is like 12 tracks and is like 50 something minutes. Anywho, Under Pressure. This is a album that started a lot. It started, so I should say, with these last four projects, the conscious rap, as I call them, they're a concept. They all tie together with one another, basically, where it's a story. And it introduces a character called Thalia, who is a robot who throughout the album kind of jumps in and gives notes on its development. She'll like jump in and say, like, oh, during the time of making Under Pressure, Logic was really influenced by this, and this, like giving you like album notes, which is really cool. And it wouldn't be till his second studio album, The Incredible True Story, that we understood why Thalia the robot was telling us all these things. So yeah, this is the kickoff of the concept. This is before fans knew that it was a concept. It was just kind of like, we thought it was just a studio debut. There's no features on it except for the quote unquote bonus tracks, which are on the deluxe only version, which is the better known version somehow. And those two features are Childish Gambino, who I'm a big fan of. This is the only time they've ever collaborated, and I really need to do it again because this is a really good song. And Big Sean, which is the first time that they've worked together, and Big Sean has popped up in other stuff of his as well. Under Pressure is very heavy content-wise. It is very different from most of his projects because it talks about his upbringing. It's kind of like, if you don't know who Logic is and you want to know him, this is the place to start. Where even he was trying to say, like, for all my fans who've been following me thus far, let me give you some background that you might already know. And then for new fans, welcome. Here's my story. Talks about his upbringing, which was not good at all. We have the song Gang Related, literally kind of signifies that essentially. Talks about the drug dealing, the violence, the gang things, kind of like a Kendrick Lamar story, the life that he could have fallen into of violence and just not good stuff. But he chose to kind of rise from that situation and really push to make his dreams come true. And it all kind of culminates with him saying, I'm here now, it's 2014, and I've got a record label signing, and yeah, I'm about to go gold and platinum. So really cool stuff. There's a track called Nikki that I won't spoil for people who want to listen to this, but it is a character. Nikki is another character who's a female that Logic is romantically engaged with. All I'm going to say with it is that it also personifies addiction, which is really cool. And there is the track Under Pressure, which is like 9 minutes long, and it has voice mails from his brother and his father, one of his brothers, his father, and kind of his sister. And it's a very standout track. Lyrically, Till the End is also one of my favorite Logic tracks ever because it's just a really good outro, really good production as well. This is the, I know No ID, I mentioned him, legendary producer who was on a couple of tracks of Young Sinatra, Welcome to Forever. This, though, was completely executive produced by No ID. He basically arrived at Def Jam and signed to them because of No ID. He was like, I want to work with you so badly. You've worked with Kanye and Jay. This is where I want to be. I want to be on their level. So the production on this is super, super good. and it really holds up super well. It's very dark, as I mentioned, so at times it's kind of hard to listen to, but there's a couple songs, fun songs on here as well. Okay, so number 3 is another album that a lot of people just really don't like at all, is Everybody. This is his third studio project. It's the third piece of the concept that I'm talking about here. 2017, 13 tracks, an hour and 11 minutes. And one of the best cover arts of his career, in my opinion, even though all of his cover art is usually really good. When he met his artist, Sam Spratt, for Under Pressure, till now, his cover art game has been fire, but like literally told Sam Spratt, hey man, can you paint the school of, no, the wedding at Karna, the famous painting, but with all of my friends in it. Yeah, like the detail work is crazy. Super awesome cover art. At first, I didn't really love this album. It was so different at the time. It's kind of like, I think now if you mesh Supermarket with Under Pressure with Bobby Tarantino, it's kind of like the mishmash of things. But over time, I grew to appreciate it a lot. A lot of people don't like it because it has a strong commentary, in a sense, on existence and religion, in the sense that where this story is based on Andy Weir's The Egg, and it features Neil deGrasse Tyson as God, and it surrounds a character named Adam, Atom, not Adam, clever, who dies and goes to a waiting room, like in the Good Place TV show, sort of, and he learns that this is a lot to explain if you haven't listened to this, and he kind of learns that he is everyone because he's atoms are in everything and everyone. So it's kind of supposed to be this message about equality and unity. And he really was standing up a lot for his biracialness, and because he's half black and half white, and talking about, black is beautiful and black is proud. And what's crazy is like, this is 2017. This is after 2 big Black Lives Matter movements. And so he felt like, man, I really don't like how America treats black people. So I'm going to stand up for my own people. And a lot of people don't think like that for some reason. There's always been this stigma about him, maybe because he's mixed or whatever. But it was a big breakthrough for him. It's his most sold album to date, mainly because the single 1-800, which is the suicide hotline number song featuring Alicia Cara and Khalid, it's like 6 times platinum now, and it got nominated for 2 Grammys. It was a big moment for him. This is where we saw Logic go from underappreciated middle ground rapper of like the internet to, oh, he's on the radio making big names for himself. And it was a time where a lot of Logic fans were like, he's too big, that whole bull crap. Anywho, I'll get off my soapbox on that. I really like this project a lot. Like, it aged really, really well for me. It's very emotional. Like, when I listen to it, like as I was listening to it again, I've listened to this track out a million times. Listening to it again, I was like crying because like the ending is very emotional. Cool features. Killer Mike does a speech on here. Ansel Elgort, apparently he's problematic now, but I do want to note at one time he wasn't, apparently, and he has made some really cool music. Logic and him have done another song under Ansel Elgort's like discography, which is really cool. And he sounds really good on it. Black Thought, from The Roots, Chuck D, Big Lembo, and No ID all on one song together, which is awesome. Juicy J, they're good friends now. I mentioned Khalid and Alicia Cara. Damian Lamar Hudson, who is an artist now on Logic's label, absolutely bodies the vocals on this album for no reason. And then Neil deGrasse Tyson is technically a feature, who I mentioned plays God on this album. It's very conceptual. It's not a lot of people's cup of tea, but I suggest you listen to it, because if you haven't, kind of brings up a lot of questions about humanity, which is really cool. Also, uncredited feature from J. Cole, which was legendary because I think like Logic has mentioned that J. Cole is like next to Wu-Tang as like his favorite rapper of all time. And you see him on the cover art very slightly, and he's at the very, very end of the album, which is really cool. It's part of the concept. It's got a lot of Easter eggs in it about the world building that Logic is creating with this concept of his 4 concept album piece, basically. And it's the 3rd one in that. And super solid. I think it's really strong. A lot of people really don't like it because it's too overbearing for some people, which I understand, but disagree with. Okay. Now let's talk about the newest project of his, which is my number 2, No Pressure. Okay. This is the retirement album. It came out just recently, July 24th, 2020. It is 15 tracks. It is basically a solid hour long. It has no features except for 2 uncredited ones from his label signee Silas and 1 line from Juicy J. And I guess you could count No ID because he executive produced this. It is the sequel to Under Pressure, and it is also the 4th in the concept 4-piece, and it's supposed to be kind of the finale to it, essentially. Okay, I struggled with grading this one, or ranking it, I should say, as my number 2 or number 1 a lot. My number 1, though, has a lot of other factors I'll talk about that just make it number 1. But this is an incredible album. It is one of his best produced albums. All the beats on it, all the samples are incredible. All the producers he had on, like No Idea I mentioned, Toro y Moi, a lot of other cool samples from Outkast to Tyler the Creator to Erykah Badu, and even sampling or featuring quote unquote Orson Welles, who had these speeches as part of his like radio show, and how it's crazy how relevant those speeches are even to today's times. So it's really, really good. And it does a lot of callbacks. It's very much for the fans, but it also is for people who just love hip hop. It's, as he mentions, there's a song called 5 Hooks because there's only 5 hooks in the whole thing. Like that's less than almost any other project he's done before, because it's just straight bars the rest of the way through. He just rapped, and it's an open book journal into his life and where he's at. And it's him basically saying, I've made it. This is how I feel. This is how I'm dealing with my depression and my anxiety that he's talked a lot about in his recent discography, and how he was in a dark place, what it's like being a father now because he is remarried and he has a child with his second wife. And yeah, now he's just going to live in Montana and just do whatever the hell he wants, basically. One of the best cover arts next to everybody, in my opinion, of his whole discography. It's the Under Pressure standard version cover art, but like redone, because I showed, if you're watching on YouTube, I showed the Under Pressure deluxe cover art, which is a face of him on a wall, like somewhere in a street. But there is, on the standard version of the album of Under Pressure, it's him in the basement with Six, his producer, and his mixing and recording engineer, Bobby Campbell. And it's kind of a callback to like, hey, we came from the basement, literally. Like, we just made tracks on a computer and a laptop and crappy microphones, and now we're doing big stuff. So he took that and flipped it on its head, and is now showing him like floating away from his basement. I've come out of the basement and I've kind of like descended to like a heavenly happiness state of mind, I guess you would say. Some cool callbacks with Growing Pains 4, which Growing Pains is a series of tracks he's done throughout his projects. Soul Food 2, there's a track called Soul Food 1 on the first Under Pressure. And there's a lot of just really good moments of referencing his influences, like Heard 'Em Say. It's a song that doesn't sample Kanye West, but there's a Kanye West song called Heard 'Em Say. And Kanye, at least as a musical influence, is a big influence on Logic, not so much of a political influence. A to Z refers to him counting his ABCs with his child. Really amazing things. My favorite two tracks are Perfect. It's so short. It's literally a perfect song. Top 5 tracks of 2020, in my opinion. Man, bodies. And then Dad Bod is my favorite track. The beat is lo-fi, just like Adventures of Stony Bob from YSI, or Young Sinatra 4. And he talks about him being a father. It's really, really, it's so different. It's really cool. Yeah, so number 2. It's similar but different, and it's such a strong album. Like everyone, because the previous project before this was 2019's Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, and as I've mentioned, with that being my number 9, people were like, this is trash. And then he took a year off and he came back and he dropped this, and everyone's like, oh wait, Logic's good. And I'm like, yes fam, he's been good the whole time. You just chose to fall off of him like a culture vulture. But yeah, no pressure. Everyone should listen to this. This is a really, really high project for me on my 2020 rap list as well, which we'll be putting out at the end of this year. Okay. Last one, the number 1. If you know who Logic is and his discography, then you already know where I'm going with this. It's The Incredible True Story. It is my number 1 for many reasons. It's kind of unfair, I think, because it was the first Logic project I listened to. I was a sophomore in college. Someone told me about Logic. I'd seen the cover art before. I'd heard the Driving Miss Daisy song from Under Pressure because I love Childish Radio. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a try. I put the streaming track on and never looked back, because this is my second favorite album of all time. It, from the first listen, blew me away. It is like very rare on a first listen, in my opinion, for an album to just, for you to understand it and for it to blow you away and drag you in so much. I didn't need a second listen to be like, oh, this is good. Literally 2 tracks in, I was like, this is genius. Mainly because it is very story driven, where all the songs are fire, but this is where he introduced the concept of these 2 characters named Thomas and Kai in space. It's kind of like a Star Wars ode, trying to find a planet paradise because Earth has collapsed due to numerous things, reasons, whatnot, war, global warming, things like that. And so they need to go to find a new planet. And it has Steve Bloom as Thomas, who is a very prolific voice actor. He voiced Spike, my favorite character from my favorite anime, Cowboy Bebop. So his voice is iconic on here. He would then go on to do other things with Logic as well. All being said, like, you're listening to this Kanye West sampled intro, and then next thing you know, it's a skit with 2 dudes in space, and it just tells a story and introduces the concept. It's genius. I had not heard something like this at this point in my life. And I honestly haven't really heard an album, maybe beyond Kendrick's discography, that is so deep and rich in storytelling since this dropped. There's not many features. And honestly, the 4 artists that he features are not that well known. Lucy Rose is someone who pops up in his discography a lot, famous person in the Logic world. Big Lembo, his friend, and then Jesse Boykins III and Drea, who's a girl he found at a Jamaican hotel karaoke bar. But the rest of it is just him. 18 tracks, 1 hour, and it holds a lot of nostalgia factor for me. But I tried to listen to it again and say, what if I remove that nostalgia factor? Tried that. Even if I remove the nostalgia factor, it still is my number 1, because it's just, there's something about it that is very, very impressive. Like, all of it, it's marketing, it's packaging, it's touring, it's songs, it's features, it's producers, how it sounds, what it says, what it tells, how it introduced this bigger narrative that as a fan you could sink your teeth into. It is incredible. It is the incredible true story. There's a lot I could say about this album, but I don't want to hold you guys here forever. I think, if anything, whether you like him or not, whether you've listened to him before or not, you all need to listen to The Incredible True Story. It really is an album that I believe that nobody can dislike. He says that at the beginning of No Pressure, where he says, in my humble opinion, I've never met anybody in my life who didn't like The Incredible True Story. Because, like, literally, I agree. There's no one I've met who does not like this album. Like, what's not to like about it? There's so much that it offers, and there's so much that it does, and it's just a really impressive project. At this time, it's 2015. It's his second studio album. Under Pressure was really good, and there's the sophomore slump. This is the exact opposite of a sophomore slump, where like this almost put him on a bar so high up, it was like, how is he going to beat it? Which for a lot of people, I think, is the reason why they don't like him, because he was afterwards seen as the prodigal son of rap for a while because of this album. And then he did what he wanted to. He had fun. He talked about religion, and people were like, no, wait, go back to do the space thing again. And he doesn't really like doing the same thing over and over. He'll do the same character, but he likes to try out things and challenge himself, which is why he does an instrumental album, and then he'll go do a space album, and then he'll do a boom bap, and then a trap, and then a conscious rap. Like, he does everything. And that's what I like most about him as an artist. Like, I'm tied to his sound. I'm tied to him as a person, because he's a great guy, in my opinion, it seems like, where peace, love, and positivity is the motto. And in a world in which we live today in 2020, we need a lot more of that. And especially in music, essentially, where we can hear that content in our ears and say, let me go out and make this world a better place, or at least try to. Well, all that being said, that is all of Logic's discography ranked from 14 to number 1. Thank you so much all for listening or for watching, because we are on YouTube now. Wrapped other episodes are coming very soon. We're cranking out a lot more content. We're trying to also crank out more content for Christian hip hop culture, which is the other podcast that my friend Adam Stansel runs, CHHC. Make sure to check that out. Follow us on all of our social media platforms. You can always email us too. You can reach out to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, our personal ones, and or the actual podcast ones. Always open to discuss music with you guys. And, go listen to some Logic if you haven't before. Check him out, especially now he's retiring. This might be the best time to get into him, to really get to know him while he continues to stream on Twitch. And you never know, you might be surprised by what the guy has to offer. I think a lot of people tend to just listen to a couple tracks and say, nah, he's this. But if you listen to an album because he's an album artist, you might walk away with a different opinion. That's what I have to say about him. So thank you all again so much for listening, and we'll catch you soon here on Wrapped. Peace, love, and happiness.